Thank you for tuning in to the Untouchable Jessica Joan podcast. I'm Jessica Joan, and this is the safe space where we talk about the real stuff that no one's really talking about. So we're going to be diving into courage, clarity, and getting over shit. Because I know you got shit, we all got shit, and we need to get over it. So thank you for joining me on this ride. Here we go. Happy Meal. The train of mass destruction, the masses indulging in overconsumption, fill your faces till you die. We'll call it death by apple pie. High on sugar and put to sleep, tooth decaying sweets, small intestine poisoned by old half-chewed rotten meat. When will we learn Coca-Cola acid burns? A McDonald's or some fast food chain at every turn. We close our eyes to the children's rapidly expanding waist size, feeding them Cheetos and fries just to end their whines and cries, educated by TV and fooled by their lies, wondering why everyone gets diseases and dies. Welcome back to another episode of the Untouchable Jessica Joan podcast. I'm Jessica Joan, and today we have the lovely, incredible Katharine Guerrero as a special guest. She is an educator of social justice, world religions, an activist, as well as an herbalist. So in today's episode, the lesson that we're discussing is unconditionally giving, especially to yourself, which is so important, especially for those givers out there, because there needs to be a balance. Because if you don't, and you're just unconditionally giving without any boundaries or anything like that, you can basically become a martyr and sacrifice yourself, and then no one's getting any of the giving. There's something I heard before, and I use it often. And it's that you can't pour an empty cup into another cup. And you shouldn't even pour from your reserves. You should only be pouring from your overflow. Yeah, I'm really excited to get into this conversation. So without further ado, Miss Katharine.
Wow, thank you. That was so beautiful. I just want to introduce myself the way that I normally would. So
Absolutely.
If I was opening up an event or sharing just space with somebody. So thank you for having me. My name is Katharine Guerrero. I am the daughter of Stella Guerrero, the granddaughter of Luis Garcia, and the adopted granddaughter of Tongva elder Gloria Arianas. And before we get started, I want to acknowledge the lands that we are currently on and recognizing the original stewards of the lands of the Tongva people. Just knowing that we are guests on these lands, and that even though myself, as an Indigenous woman, I too am a guest. My family comes from the South, where, borders are being drawn on, makeshift ideas of what separates people from their lands and territories. And I, come here to these Tongva lands as a guest, but grateful for the space and grateful for just the stewardship, because if it weren't for them, we wouldn't have these beautiful oak trees that we still see around us. We wouldn't have the palms. We wouldn't have, all of the traditional native plants that we see. But we also have to acknowledge that a lot of that has disappeared. Our waterways are no longer in their traditional sense with the paved Los Angeles River. We do not have salmon flowing through our waters as we used to, and we do not have grizzlies roaming. A lot of people know that we still have bears here, but we actually used to have grizzlies here. So just paying that homage to the Tongva people, knowing that we are honoring them, we are respecting them, and hopefully one day can return some of this land to them. So thank you so much for having me and just having that space to share that.
Yes, thank you so much. Wow, I didn't even know that there were salmon that would swim through.
Yeah, yeah. There was a lot of plant life, a lot of, animals that were, these were their natural habitats. But when, the mission system started to develop here in California, they obviously wanted to locate themselves near water resources, but realized that it would create a lot of flooding. And so, as the city of Los Angeles, which was the village of Yangna, it was a major intersectional city that the local Tataviam, Chumash, even Hashimen from the south would integrate and gather. And so it's really disheartening because you almost can't avoid the fact that it was intentional that the city of Los Angeles was built on this epicenter. And so because of that, they had to reroute the Los Angeles River. So if any of you have ever driven and have seen, the waterways going through, what is it, Frogtown, and then going behind Union Station, and then under like the First Street, Fourth Street bridges and such, that's all completely rerouted. That is
Wow.
not the original trajectory of what that river was. And that was purely for infrastructure. So, and so with that come dams and other, non-natural structures. And so with that came the loss of the fish and other types of animals that called this basin their home. So,
Wow. That's so crazy because to me, in my very little knowledge of what was, here before, I just always thought of LA to just be deserty. I would hear about, oh, there used to be orange groves. Like to me, I wouldn't even think that it was a place that had an abundance of resources like that or even wildlife, to that degree. So that's really interesting. And I mean, I didn't even know that it was the Tongva land until we met, at a firm. So, I mean, I'm sure a lot of the listeners don't even know. So if you could, just share with us a little bit, like, who are they? Like, that way we can, walk and pay respects knowing what was here before us.
yeah. So the Tongva people, I mean, they date all the ways back to over 10,000 years in this basin. And that becomes a really, kind of tough concept when we think about California history, specifically Los Angeles history, because a lot of folks, California is a relatively new state, right, in comparison to other states. And so people tend to think, oh, well, it was Mexico before this, right? Which we well know, yes, definitely Mexican settlement, absolutely. And then people tend to think, okay, well, then if it was part of Mexico, then that means it was part of what they call like Aztlan. And so Aztlan was the kind of like a larger empire of, Aztec and other indigenous cultures in this area. But even before Aztlan, like, we have the original people. So the Tongva is actually a larger collective name of different tribes that existed here in the Los Angeles basin. And so they refer to this region as like Tongvayar. And it was different communities. And unfortunately, I mean, as much as I sit with my grandma and she gives me the names of the villages, I cannot properly pronounce them. But if you start to think about, like, just to kind of give folks like things to make those connections, is think about, okay, so Tongvaya, right? Tongva, that was different bands and tribes existing all in the basin. So we had people in Hahamunga, right? Or you think of words like Cucamonga or Topanga, right? And so we still adopt a lot of the similar words of the regions of which these villages were. But probably I can give a little bit more, because I know a little bit more history, is the space of creation, which is Pavungna. And so Pavungna is actually located on the campus of Long Beach, Cal State Long Beach, which is, again, it's hard to imagine that the only really like recognized land of the Tongva people exists on a college campus in a parking lot.
Wow.
So a lot of people, if you talk about Cal State Long Beach and you talk about like, the pyramid, oh, okay, the pyramid, or the Japanese gardens. Okay, so right next to the Japanese gardens is a parking lot, and then there's a big lot of land, and that is Pavungna. And Pavungna is, again, another major gathering space for specifically the Ahashiman, which are further south of us. I believe their territories start around the just south of Huntington Beach, San Juan Capistrano area, all the ways down through parts of San Diego. Okay, so just north of San Diego. And that's the Ahashiman territory. But they have a lot of shared sites with the Tongva people. And so Pavungna was a space in which people would come again and gather, pray, hold ceremony, and really use it as the sacred space that it is. But unfortunately, it sits in a parking lot at a college.
God, it's so heartbreaking.
Yeah, and it actually has been under a lot of desecration in the past few years. In the past couple of years, they started dumping soil that they've taken from other parts of the campus. There are actual remains there.
Wow.
So they have remains actually throughout Cal State Long Beach that they have found in doing construction. And so when they find these remains, they intend to move them to Pavungna. But, in that process, they're also dumping other contaminated soils in that space.
Wow, that's really insane and messed up. So the remains that they're finding, do you know if was it also like a sacred burial site? Is that part of it, or just throughout history?
They have found some burial sites near there, but there are remains of recent elders who have passed as well. And so it's a little bit of both. And there's actual spots where if you walk on the campus, and this happens specifically after the rain, and I was last there a couple months ago when we got a little bit of rain. And if you walk and you look on the ground, you'll actually see like shell chippings. And so whenever you see a lot of shells, that shows that there was probably like ceremony or burials. And so you'll see shell mounds actually on the campus in the dirt. And so it's just that reminder that, that whole campus, like, because again, when you look at the parameters of the way it is today, 10 acres, a parking lot, you think, oh, that's only the space. But it's like, no, you have to imagine none of this was here. So everything, all of these buildings are built on top of these villages, on top of ceremonial grounds, on top of gathering spaces or just homes. And my grandma always reminds folks that when you're walking on this pavement, you're walking on our villages. You're walking on our ancestral homes. You're walking on our gathering spaces. And so the concrete allows you to forget about that. But for us, not myself by blood, but my grandma, for the Tongva people, we always carry that. We're always carrying that memory. We're always carrying that, knowledge of where you're walking on our remains almost.
Yeah, I mean, like literally. for people, obviously you and I, we have this awareness and, understand these things, but for people that are just waking up to this concept and understanding this and growing in awareness, what would you say are some ways that they could be respectful? Like, because, obviously if they're going to school there, they're going to school there. But what can they do in their part of being, giving back and giving to that space and the energy that exists there?
I first want to acknowledge the fact that you use the phrase waking up, right? I love that phrase because I'm sorry, I am not a person who likes the whole like woke ideology.
Me either. I call that folk.
Yes.
Fake woke.
Exactly. And so when you use that phrase waking up, it's a process, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think, that's why I think I appreciate that phrase so much more, because when you're woke, that's past tense, right? Like I already did it.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
I'm there. But waking up is asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
It's interaction. It's acknowledgement, accountability. It's so many things. So thank you so much for phrasing it that way, because I think it's exactly those things that are necessary to move forward and start acknowledging the lands that we're on, So first and foremost, yes, identify and try to find out the lands that you occupy, the lands that you're a guest on. There's lots of apps out there. You could look for that, there's those things. But once you acknowledge it, once you know what it is, start doing some research yourself. And I'm going to emphasize yourself. Don't go and find your nearest indigenous person and start asking them a bunch of questions.
It's not their labor to do.
Exactly. Now, does this mean that you're entirely on your own? And, no, show up, find out where there are spaces of, learning and sharing and gathering. I know, granted, this past year, a lot of that has gone away, but it's coming back, look for these keywords. Like if you want to know more about Pavungna, there's social media out there, because again, it is currently being desecrated. So there is, Friends of Pavungna. There is a movement to get that acknowledged and recognized. So look for those types of things and go and participate. But when you participate, show up and just be there to listen. That is probably the best thing that any ally or a person who wants to support, show up and listen. Don't come with your agenda. Don't come and say, oh, this would be really cool if you, no, just show up and listen. And trust me, you will learn so much more, and not just in the sense of, that knowledge or the brain, but your heart is going to learn so much more, and so I think that's probably the best way. Just find out the land you're occupying. Find out if there's any movement that's taking place on that land that you can be an assistance of. And when you do show up for that assistance, show up ready to learn, ready to listen, and just come open mind, open heart, and I think that's probably the most genuine way. The next thing, don't tokenize. Don't call in, you're going to have a gathering. Don't call in an elder just to, do the land acknowledgement and then say thank you and send them on their way. Anytime you want to lead something or be part of something and you want to involve the local or the original stewards of the land, they have to have a seat at the table. Mm-hmm. We lost 2 beautiful Tongva elders this past year, Barbara Drake and Julia Bogny. Barbara Drake was plant medicine. That's what she taught us all. She shared the knowledge of the plants. And Julia Bogny was a storyteller. My grandma called her an encyclopedia. She said another library just is gone, And my takeaway from Julia, because she always showed up, you called her, she showed up, she was ready to go. And even if it was late at night and you're dealing with an elder and you're apologizing, I'm so sorry, Julie, I'm so sorry, or whatever. And she always used to say, nope, I'm going to be here, because if I'm not at the table, then I'm on the menu. And that always stuck with me, because it's so true. Invite our elders, invite our indigenous people to the table. Don't tokenize them. Don't come and ask for a prayer. Don't come and ask for a land acknowledgement unless they have a seat at the table with whatever it is you're working on. Whatever it is. I mean, if you're having an Earth Day march, right, and you want that land acknowledgement, well, then that person needs to also be sitting there on the agenda that you're trying to promote for that Earth Day march, right? So I think that's something that's really important.
Oh my God, it's so important. Like the whole new age woke folk movement that's happening, like this is the thing. I'm really spiritual. I don't need to do anything, dress a certain way, or do anything to know my own divinity and my connection with spirit and what I'm here to do, which is like even why I'm having this podcast. And, I'm so grateful that we're having this conversation right now. Like there's a lot of things in the room, you guys. You guys don't even know. But I even have some friends of mine who I had to distance myself from and the things that they're doing, because I saw that happening, and where they're wanting to be allies, quote unquote, but I see this fake allyship, this tokenizing of things, this wanting to do something but coming from this place of privilege, and not even like they want to be like, oh, see, I'm doing all these things to help you people, kind of. And I'm like, you can't do this. Like this doesn't work. And there's a reason why their movement isn't going where it needs to go, because it's missing that heart and it's missing that awareness. And I think that's so important with the unconditionally giving aspect of it, where it's not about you. It's not about you. And that's why I love that you said, like, just come and listen. Even for myself, I'm very connected to a lot of different things. I feel very deeply karmically connected to the First Nations and certain things. And even with, I haven't gotten my ancestry test, and who knows if I will, but I know the things that have a purpose for in shedding light on. But I also know that I only know what I know. And so I'm like, hey, can you come here and share? Because I don't know all the things. So can you help me so I can listen and I can learn and help shed that? And I know you being an activist too, I'm sure that comes across a lot where you encounter that. And I'd love to, for you to like share more about what that's even like in being an activist, how to be in the space of unconditionally giving and what that even means to you.
Yeah, I think, again, saying that it's not about me, right? Like when you're out there doing things, it's first and foremost, you don't do things for yourself. But I think also too, one of the things that I learned very early on, once I actually started sitting down with my elders, and once I actually started listening, because yes, we all come in bright-eyed. I mean, you want to save the world, you want to do what you can, you want to just jump right in, right? But again, it's when you stop and it's when you listen and you start learning, and you realize that it isn't about that. And so then even myself as an activist, a land defender, a water protector, and all those things, it's not even about us. It's about the generations ahead of us, right?
Yep.
So there's never a focal point where it's even for our movement or even for this moment at this time, that this is for 7 generations ahead, that this is for the future. And so unless you've kind of stopped that mindset of, I'm going to go be the one with the bullhorn, I'm going to be on the soapbox, I'm going to be the one coordinating this march, I'm going to be this. And don't get me wrong, all great things and all things that are necessary at certain points. But when that ego goes away, And you now realize that you're here for people that you will not know in a physical sense.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the real work and that real perseverance really starts to take shape. And that's where it becomes not so much, okay, because I mean, don't get me wrong. I've run myself ragged. I've been to every demonstration. I was driving from Wilshire to the federal building to City Hall to all of those things. But it's like, for what, right?
Mm-hmm.
For what? You know, yes, powerful. Yes, it made the news. Yes, I made a cool sign. But when and this is going to sound so silly and maybe even cliche, but when I take a bean and cheese burrito to my grandma and we sit in her yard and she tells me stories and she tells me other things, it's like, oh, okay, this is the work right here, making sure that my grandma is taken care of, because she is a story keeper, she is a language keeper, she's any of those things. Okay, so this is the work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or, my sister in Minnesota is doing work, in her community. And so it's like, okay, well, how can I support? How can I show up? How can I do that? And it's the quiet, and it's the community that comes out of that. And that's the work, and again, it's not for us. It's, I mean, will I see hopefully some strides? Maybe. But the benefit and the goal is that 7 generations from now, they don't have to be doing this work.
Mm-hmm.
That they could just sit in the garden and stay in the garden. And, hopefully everybody has a garden at that point. That they don't have to run ragged to City Hall, to the federal building, to all those places,
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's like when it really happens, when you realize that you're not doing this for this moment, you're doing it for the future, genuinely.
Mm-hmm.
Again, not just the catchphrase. That's where you're at. And, and some people have a problem with that, because we live in that age of instant. We live in that age of, look at me, look at what I'm doing. And it's a very status base. And so in Indian country, like, we call that dominant culture.
Mm.
That's the dominant culture
Mm-hmm.
that's calling for that, right? That's not our culture,
Mm-hmm.
right? People love the phrase decolonize. I mean, my God, like, that's become like the buzzword since 2016.
Oh my God.
And I'm surprised somebody hasn't like copywritten it by now. There's like a little C next to it. But it's like, when you really, really, really talk about decolonization, it's not a trend. It's the exact opposite.
Mm-hmm.
It's quiet.
Mm-hmm.
It's listening. It's a return, right? And so I think that's the important part. That's we get things kind of misconstrued. Dominant culture is dominant for a reason,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's always going to be there, and we don't work that way.
No, not at all. Oh my gosh. Can I just acknowledge that your transparency is so refreshing? Like, I just feel so grateful because she puts in the work. I've seen it. And when I was going to the meetings and trying to learn as much as I can, I have my own ways of how I know that I can support the shift and the evolution of things happening. But I'm like, man, these girls be working so hard. I'm like praying for you guys and seeing you guys just run yourself ragged, and to just, especially right now in this time of the world in existence, activism, everyone wanting to be a part of a movement, which is great that people are getting fired up. People are, getting out of these constructs where they were mostly like on a hamster wheel, like not even aware of these things. But there is a whole glorification of this, a whole do it for the gram with the sign. And I'm so badass because I'm doing all this stuff. And then it just really takes away from what is really important. And so, like you said, the quietness is so important, even with me learning about decolonization and going through my own transformation and waking up out of, whether it be the white supremacy thing as well as the colonization thing and learning about my history. I'm mainly Filipino. There are other lineages within me, but even just diving into that, I was like, wow, I was so conditioned. I didn't even realize this. Wow, on the screen, there were only like blonde, blue-eyed white guys. And so I was attracted to that. I mean, full disclaimer. And that's why it's so important for me in sharing and helping, pass a torch or like be a bridge to anyone to this process, because it's not about the show and tell. It's about the inner work. It's about the remembering. It's about, like the whole theme of this episode is the giving to yourself, giving yourself even the time to take a break to where you're not just part of the capitalistic running around and like thinking you have to do all these things, or even if you're doing it for a good reason. And even for, if you're like have a close family and always taking care of people, there's also things to that where, people like to martyr themselves. I used to do it all the time. And so, yeah, I just had a little moment there.
No, and all of that is absolutely brilliant and valid, right? There's so many things that can come from just that reflection right there. First of all, dominant culture has capitalized on this concept of self-help or self-care or, spirituality and new age and all of those things, right? And what do they use? They use Audre Lorde, how self-care is a form of resistance, right? Like they use that quote by hers all the time, and people think like, yeah, so because Audre Lorde says that we need self-care, that means I need a bubble bath like on Sundays, right? And that's and so then they've capitalized all of that. They've made it into something commercial when in fact what she was talking about, because at the time she was battling cancer, and she was saying, look, the fact that I am resilient, the fact that I am still standing in this totally corrupt, broken system is a resilience, right? That's what's happening. This isn't about bubble baths.
Right.
And don't get me wrong, a bubble bath is a good, okay? I'm not putting down
some salt in there.
Yeah. I'm not putting down a bubble bath. I'm not putting down anything that somebody will do to treat themselves, so to say. But we just have to understand that there's more, right? And
it's deeper.
So, yeah. And taking the time, because again, when we jump right into what the dominant culture wants us to think, like you said, the conditioning, right? So self-care conditioning is face mask, bath bombs, and whatever other things, and they've even capitalized on pre-colonial techniques or whatever you want to call them, right? So old traditions of using natural remedies and herbalism. I mean, I see that a lot, like being an herbalist and seeing
They have these little kits that are like so overpriced, and who knows how they're even sourced. And it's like, here you go.
Yeah, exactly. Like elderberry, right? For example, I go to, you go to CVS now. And before, like you would find elderberry chews or elderberry syrup in maybe a, what kind of store? Like just like a independent, natural food store, right? But now I go to CVS and I see elderberry chews, elderberry lozenges, elderberry gummies, and it's like elderberry is a very sacred medicine, Elderberries, the berries themselves obviously have very healing properties, but not only that, but the branches of the elderberry tree are used to make clapper sticks, right? And clapper sticks are traditional to, again, our Southern California tribes for their songs. And so they've taken something very traditional and have now capitalized on it, right? Because we live in like this fear of getting sick, especially, you know, in the past year. So that's what's happening. That the dominant culture is kind of taking these notions of what we consider to be like inner reflection, self-help, self-care, all of those things, and have turned it into something manipulative, right? And so that's why, like you said, it has to go deeper. It has to go beyond just that surface level and actually taking that pause, taking that time to, you know, find space for yourself. And unfortunately, sometimes those are dark paths, right? And I mean, and unless some people are just all about the cathartic ways, I don't know people that sign up for that, right? People are going to sign up for a yoga retreat. And again, I'm a yoga teacher, so nothing against it, you know, but people are going to sign up for a yoga retreat, pay $500 to go to Joshua Tree, pose on some rocks, eat some vegan food, and sing some songs around a campfire, right? Rather than maybe ask some tough questions.
Shadow work.
Yeah. Do some journaling. Have a tough conversation with a family member, you know, do that type of stuff because, you know, that's not glorified. The messy part of healing is not on the table. You know, they want quick self-help. And again, that goes back to that instant gratification, right? How can I help? What can I do to save the world right now that everybody's going to see and then praise me for and then say, good job, you did wonderful. Right?
And that is convenient to oneself.
Exactly. I'm free on Saturday. Oh, guess what? After the march, we could go to brunch. Cool. Right? You know?
Yeah.
It's so silly, but it's like go sit there. Go listen to the people that you're marching to help. Right? Go listen to their stories. Don't capture it on film. I'm sick of those too. Like, you know, people giving homeless people money and they capture it on
my
film.
God, I can't.
You know, like go sit and listen. Sit and listen. And then your ego's going to go away, you know, and then you're going to start doing the real work. So
it's like really being of service. I mean, one of the things too that you said that is what I envision for my vision that I'm holding for the new earth is everyone having a garden. And I feel a lot of my own healing and deeper understanding and deeper connection with spirit, with everyone and all the beings was when I started putting my hands in the earth. Yes. And it's when I moved to Hawaii, and one of my best friends, Hannah, she works for this nonprofit that restores the dry forest in Maui. So I'd go on these volunteer trips, and here are these endangered trees, and I'm all dirty and sweaty, and I'm loving it, and just like putting my hands in there and literally giving back to the mother. Yep. And that just changed everything. And I feel like if everyone would just plant a tree, it'll change your life, you guys. Because if we don't have trees, we don't have oxygen. If we don't have this earth, we don't even exist. And people forget that this is our first mother. This is our first mother. And look we've been desecrating her, not caring about her, just basically prostituting her. Like, you know, it's, you know, I can be a little vulgar, guys, but like this is really an issue. This is really something that's important to press upon and to look upon. But like, what are your thoughts on these things, on how this also like affects people and like your experience with connecting with nature and gardening?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my gosh, so first of all, nature is our first teacher, right? If like I teach this in my theology classes, we talk about natural law, and if our dominant culture shifted the other direction and purely just looked to nature, I mean, first of all, nature is so codependent on itself to exist, right? That we would find that, yes, we too have to be that vulnerable and that open to that codependency, right? I always think about redwoods, right? And the way that they grow. And that redwoods will grow out of what they call a circle of life. And so, you know, redwood grows and out comes the spawn that create a ring. And eventually when that redwood's too old or it catches fire or whatever it does and it disappears, you now have a ring of about 4 or 5 other redwoods that are now going to grow in its place.
Oh, wow.
And that's the way that they recreate. I love bees. I talk to bees. I see them and I welcome them. I greet them. Sometimes if they're just doing their thing in the flowers, I sit and just watch them and thank them, and those are those things that we forget that, nature has taken care of itself long before we were here, And if we let that be our teacher, if we let ourselves connect, and so, like you said, getting our hands in that dirt, getting to the point that we are there in it. And I think about this kind of this idea when it comes to Islam, and I teach world religions, and I remember the first time I read this, I learned this, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so brilliant. And so in Islam, they believe that we as humans, we're inherently good. We are born inherently good. It is out of forgetfulness that we stray from that goodness. And I love it because it's something that is just so simple and so just, everybody's forgotten something in their life, right? It's a very human thing that we do. And so there's nothing more to it. We just forget. That's it. So just as you said, there's no trees, there's nothing. Here in LA, we walk on concrete all day. We drive on concrete. We look at a river that has been paved in concrete, right? We forget.
Yeah.
We have forgotten what it is to connect to nature. And so because of that, we have forgotten a lot about what our true selves are, what our true spirit is. And that spirit is community, connection, love, protection. And we forget. And so, yeah, we have to get back to that soil, to the ground, to all of those things. My teacher, my herbalist teacher, she always says, just compost that shit, right? That's her motto for everything, not just for her backyard, not just for her garden, but for life too. Compost that shit. Send it back and see what comes back to you, right? Don't let it go. We love that phrase, the new age, like, let it go, right? Let it go. Send it up in a balloon. Send it up in a lantern. And again, beautiful things. But she's like, no, compost that shit. Put it back to the ground. Give it back and see what returns to you. It's going to, it's going to hit you maybe differently when it comes back. It's going to give you a little aha moment when it comes back, or maybe you're just not ready for it right now. So put it back and then it'll come back to you when you're ready. So, yeah, I think it's about forgetfulness. We're forgetting that connection. We're forgetting that teaching. We're forgetting, like you said, our first mother, right? Here to teach us, here to show us how we need to exist interconnectedly, dependently, and all the concrete, all the buildings, all of it just distract us.
Oh, man, that was so beautiful. I'm looking at compost in a totally different way now. To me, it's what that's a perfect analogy for what I constantly say, transmutation. It's like we're transmuting, we're composting this energy, these feelings, these traumas, the stuff we don't need anymore, but like giving it back. And like really the theme of this is service, like how to be in service. Because when you're in service and unconditionally giving to yourself, you are in that space to also unconditionally give to everyone else around us. And we are all interconnected, just like you're saying, nature's so codependent. And that's such a funny thing, because when I hear codependent, I have like a little trigger. I'm like, codependent. And I was like, wait. And I have like a negative connotation a little bit with it, which this let me see it in a different way, where it's codependent. Like it is dependent on other things to coexist, which is so vulnerable, which, we have, either a hard time doing or doing it in a way that's actually really toxic, because there is also no independence within the codependent. So, just being of service, I feel, for me, has been the greatest teacher, and also what gives me the most joy is to be in that space. And I'm just excited for all the listeners to like really think about what that is. And so, for you, what would you press upon them as far as what are some simple ways, right? If we're gonna do a new like our actual self-care, right?
Yeah.
Still, you can do your bubble baths, you guys. Like, I'm all for it. We're all for it. We're here for it. But what are some practical things that they could do in their daily life to think about to really dig that deeper self-care?
The composting. And again, so it's always like those simplest things, right? It's the simple solutions. And I'm going to tell like a little side story as far as like the simple solutions. I was really fortunate. I think it was more than 10 years ago. I was able to see the Dalai Lama. Like, he came to visit LA, and, it was a big to do. Obviously, it's the Dalai Lama, right? And I was in this arena, thousands of people there. And he comes out on the stage, and everybody just like, you immediately just feel that energy, right? Like, you just feel that lightness. It's this like, fangirl like doesn't even begin to, describe it. But it's like, he comes out and everybody is just so joyful. You just feel it. And he sits down, and, obviously he's sitting on a stage, so there's lights hitting him. So he pulls out this little cute sun visor, and everybody just laughs. And it was kind of like, in retrospect, I realized like everybody's just, again, like kind of like that tokenization a little bit, right? Like he's becoming this little symbol of all the things that we wish we were or that bring joy. And so he's being interviewed, and he's asked a question, and they say like, we're just going to get to it. What is the secret? What is the secret to life? Like, just tell us. And he just looks and he says it so matter-of-factly, and he says, sleep. Exactly,
What?
right? So yeah, your reaction is like 5,000, 10,000 people like all, and they're like, are you kidding me? Like, I paid for you to tell me I need to go to sleep, right? And he explains it, and he talks about that, how we're never truly present because of lack of sleep. Like, I mean, at the time, like, FOMO wasn't a coined phrase, right? But he really just explained that concept of like fear of missing out. We're so consumed in just being like, with everyone or part of everything, or, again, that sense of running ragged, right? That we don't nurture and take care of ourselves. And realize that if I'm not up until, 2 a.m. doing everything that I need to do, then I'm going to be a better person at 7 a.m. to the people who really need me, like maybe my family or maybe my dog or maybe, something else. And so once he explained, everybody was like, oh, okay, you tricked us, whatever. We're still not going to sleep, But I think, going back to what you said, like, it's the simplest things that we can do for ourselves. And one of the things that I think that we can do that is the true self-care, that is the true, nourishment that we need, is to be kind to ourselves. We need to be kind to ourselves, because we're all here navigating this crazy environment that we are in. We're here for a reason. We are here in this time, this space, this moment, you and I having this conversation, right? It's all meant. But there's no guidebook. There's no instructions. There's no right or wrong way. And so, yeah, are we going to fuck up? Yes. Are we going to say the wrong thing? Yeah. Are we going to show up to the wrong thing? Sure. And so what happens is that, again, dominant culture projects this idea of perfectionism or being woke. I mean, I feel like, again, being woke is just another attack. It's a way of attacking somebody. So it's like, just we've done a good job of telling others to be kind to each other, but we have to be kind to ourselves.
Mm-hmm. See, guys, there's a theme. I've said this.
But it's true, and it's probably the biggest thing that we forget. I know I forget it.
It's like sometimes it's so hard to do. We've just been so conditioned to be so mean to ourselves with our thoughts, or the, like capitalistic need to do this, need to do this. It's like, man, they really get you sometimes.
Well, and it's exactly what you said. It's capitalism, right? Because will they make money off of people who have beautiful gardens and live good lives and help their neighbors? No.
Yeah.
You're going to make money off people who get upset with themselves, self-isolate, and then, turn to other things to find that happiness that they, think they lost. But really, it's just a matter of tuning in and just saying, it's okay, be gentle, and I think that's so important. So it's like, yeah, what can you do? Be kind to yourself. The next thing is just listen. Listen to others. Listen to yourself. Like, tune in to yourself, not dominant culture, not expectations, not, anything else. Listen to, like, you and I have talked about intuition before. It's there. It's there. It's always there. And then you're the person that, like, later on you're like, oh, I knew it. And then what do you do after you say I knew it? You say, oh my God, I'm so stupid. Why didn't I listen? So now you've, like, struck out, right? So now you're not listening to yourself, and you're not being kind to yourself. And
vicious cycle.
Yeah. You're setting yourself up, And trust me, easier said than done, right? There's plenty of things that will make us derail from this. But I think, really setting aside that space, and when you have those moments of clarity, honor them. Honor them. Honor the kindness that you're showing yourself. Honor that you listened to someone else. Maybe you listened to somebody that you instead would have cut off, but you listen, and now you can move forward, or you listen to yourself. So honor those moments when they happen, and as you start honoring them, it'll come more frequent,
I love it. Honestly, I could talk to you for like days on end. This is great. I feel like this is my longest episode yet. Yeah, it's so much gold. So as we're coming to our ending, which I feel like you already have given so much golden nuggets, but at the end of the episode, I invite the audience to, like, do something for that week or that day, or just something to contemplate or think about. So I also invite my guests to invite them, whatever you want to invite them to do.
I think based off of, like, 'cause, I mean, gosh, I feel like I could talk to you like for at least another couple hours.
I know.
But
she'll probably be back, guys.
Yeah, of course I'd be back. But no, I think just some of the things that you were saying in combination, just us vibing together, is get your hands in the dirt, and whatever that means, right? So that can be literally go outside, ground, take off your shoes, walk around, reconnect, remember, go back, or in that more figurative way, get your hands in the dirt, start being kind, start listening, start composting that shit for yourself, right? So I think that's maybe a good challenge, and baby steps, right? Don't write a huge to-do list. I mean, I'm a huge to-do list person. I am the person that writes a list just so that, like, with things that I've already done, just so I could cross them off. Like,
oh, it's so gratifying, though.
It
so
is
gratifying.
But, just I guess, yeah, maybe if I'm going to catchphrase it, get your hands in the dirt, and whatever that means. If that's literally or figuratively, just take a moment this week and do that. And the reason why you're doing that is for that concept of memory. Bring yourself home. Bring yourself back.
Oh, I love it. I couldn't have said it better. And then, because my mentor, she's like, you need to still give one when I tried to pass off the baton to her. So, you guys, I invite you. Going to keep it practical. I'm going to steal a little bit from Catherine. We're stealing it from the Dalai Lama and stealing it from whatever. It all came from somewhere, guys.
Mm-hmm.
But my invitation is for you for 1 week, because I've done this too. So whatever I'm asking you to do, I've also done it myself. Set a new sleep schedule for yourself. Here's the opportunity. You've been wanting to wake up at 6 a.m. Okay, might be too crazy. 7 a.m. Get to bed by 10. Too crazy. Okay, midnight. I get it. It's LA or for wherever you guys are. But to set a tone of the intention to get to bed earlier, a bedtime that you desire that you might think is impossible, and just do it. Set the alarms, do whatever you need to do ahead of time, and then set that wake up time early. And just give yourself a week. See what happens. So that is it for now. We'll see you real soon. Thank you all. I love you. Thank you again for tuning in. It means the world to me. And if you enjoyed this podcast and this episode, it would be so helpful if you subscribe, like, or comment. And this will allow this podcast to grow and for it to reach as many people as it can. So thank you again so much.